Or get some more of this tea first, then I'll pop over there. A pretty good rainstorm going outside. Audio. There we go. Now, where was the at? Look at this big bottom panel, I think. Good evening. Good evening over there. Lucas. How are we doing? Let's see. Get the lighting consistent, right? So it's going to be on this side. Away. Somewhere with this. There. So kind of push it off in this direction. So watching this guy talk about an old school inker and kind of how they would leave a lot of the pencils alone for the inks to do. Maybe I should kind of set this up so it works better that way. So I'm kind of figuring out the details in that to save a lot of that work for the actual inking process rather than trying to flesh it out here too much. Right. More with the side to the pencil. So I was looking at some finished inks from or pencils too, actually, from Sean Gordon Murphy. And how kind of loose his pencils are and how much he probably actually solves once he gets into actually inking everything. Some more text on here. See any over there. Figure that out, I guess, before I get too far ahead of myself. so that I don't get too much trouble. I love isometric too. This technically isn't quite isometric. It's a subtle 2-point, but it does have that kind of isometric feel to it to a certain degree. So I'm trying to treat this like a telephoto shot, or what they call a long lens shot. Design this bug, so I wanted to feel like a tree hopper, but it is not. But I do like isometric a lot. Which I have a whole course on using it as a set for let's see, as a set for drawing things in perspective. So you can design like a scene, and then use that scene and isometric that you designed as kind of like a reference for drawing it from different points of view using different kind of lenses and things. Yeah, it's designed to be really, really subtle. So, but one of the things I have my students do in that project is they draw one of their shots using kind of an extreme telephoto effect. Let's see, fix that really good. Get myself in trouble. Where basically there's no real vanishing lines, but they're kind of drawing. It's a kind of orthographic view that's drawing things at from a corner, rather than drawing to vanishing points. So it kind of flattens things out in an extreme way. And but that's a better way. You can, but yeah, but isometrics are really handy perspective type. So I got Kenneth Roquefort's Groken in the mail the other day. So I guess the camera rotated the wrong spot. And kind of realized I was kind of looking for some of his work online, and I think he doesn't actually ink his work. I think he just does really detailed pencils and then scans them in and darkens them up. So I was looking at kind of how his pencils are being used in the book, and how they're kind of showing up in the comic, and then kind of the few examples I was able to find of his stuff. This is a personal project for me, so I've never really done comics before, and I wanted to I started doing this concept project, and as I've been working on it, I've been thinking of stories. Um, so I was trying to think of characters and locations and that. For me, like, locations and creatures are really, really easy, but to do characters, for me, you got to know who they are. Otherwise, they're just kind of like a generic kind of design thing rather than an actual character. And so, as I've been thinking up stories, it made me wonder if maybe I should do my own little project. And so, I actually have a full script written out, which is not this, but I thought this is a little story I came up with in my head that's relatively simple compared to the other one. I thought it's been getting more complicated in my head as I've been developing it, but I thought I would kind of do this one 5 pages at a time as like a training exercise. Experimenting with different penciling and inking techniques. Like one of the things I was thinking about as I've been doing this is the artists I was looking at that do relatively simple pencils. And it's like, what if I did my pencils half as big? So this is the full size 11 by 17. It's a fairly sizable piece of paper. But if I'm going to keep my pencils relatively loose, or tight enough where I've got all the proper proportions and details I need, and then all the detailing can happen in the inking, then maybe I should do the pencils half their size, then blow them up, and then ink them on the finished sheet. Because I did the roughs on a letter-sized paper, 8.5 by 11, but then they're also half sheets actually of that, so 2 per sheet. But I've been studying up on it. I did like a little test last summer, but I'm trying to get a bunch done this summer. I had some other distractions last summer that I kind of get in my way, but I should put it there just to make it a little more in depth. So, but I've been doing a bunch of studying. It's kind of wanted to bring together a bunch of the skills and things I've been working on and teaching in a way that I haven't really done before. So, but I thought if I did kind of a scene at a time with this, that that would be a good way to kind of start this out and see where it goes. So that's kind of what's going on here. So I have to, let's see. But Yeah, these are my kind of rough versions here. Try to light up right of the short story beginning here. So that's the first kind of scene, is them going from this landing craft here to that location. And the kind of the background of the genesis of the whole thing was the idea that there's this planet that humans have hurried off and settled. And the planet, when they approach it, they realize it kind of looks like a giant tangle of plants, like a bramble, like a bunch of vines and things all kind of tangled, branches and things all tangled together. Anyway, they when they arrive, there's some kind of cataclysm that happens, and this kind of forces them all to land on the planet, maybe ahead of schedule. And they settle on this planet. Anyway, there's evidence of like a past civilization, but the people or whatever was there is long gone. Like the whatever, they don't even know what it is because there's no like biological evidence of it, just some artifacts and that I call like totems and vaults and things like that. And so they're like, well, it's an empty planet. We will settle here, and we can. So the story I wrote originally is set long, long after all of that, but that's kind of the backdrop of why they're there. And then this one here, though, this one's set much closer to when they settled, so much closer to landfall. And this guy's a scavenger, sort of like they're still trying to locate some of the fallen colony craft. When they flew out from Earth, this is like a multi-generational trip. So this wasn't like Star Trek where they zip around the galaxy really, really fast. This was something that would take them hundreds of years, if not like 1,000 years, to get here. And so they're completely isolated from Earth, and as a result of the crash, and a number of the colony ships were kind of separated out, and so I think they finally found one of them. They kind of got lost too in the bramble because it's not like it's a flat landscape. There's a lot of verticality to it, and as a result, some of the ships that crashed are still missing. So as I said, about 80 years afterwards, so they've had a couple of generations of settling in, and then this guy has been sent out to investigate a possible crash site. And so the story here is kind of what he finds out there. And what it tells them about the planet that they are on. Because they don't know yet anything about really its history or why it is the way it is or any of that. It's just kind of there. It's full of dangerous and interesting and compelling native life. Yeah, so that's kind of the story I got running with it. I thought I would kind of take this one a scene at a time, but I've had thoughts for what the further scenes would be like since starting this. So I've been doing some concepts and things for that to figure out what that's like. And again, I've never quite done anything like this myself, but I've learned a lot about cinematic storytelling and all that. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to apply all that. So it wasn't really part of my own education, um, but it's something I've ended up teaching a lot and studying a lot. So I thought, worth streaming as I go, and I've got these all kind of set up, so all I have to do is just really draw them. I've been debating the scanner question for these larger images. Yeah, so for me, it's been an interesting story because it kind of, as it gets more expanded, I get more interested in it. If I'm more interested, then maybe others will be too. You know. And I've always read comics, and I've talked about it on here before. I kind of got back into reading them again a lot more during COVID. I kind of dug out my old box of comics and was reading through those when that happened initially, and kind of got me thinking about stuff. But so I've watched some, the newer pencilers is like a new group of relatively sketchy ones, but especially Daniel Warren Johnson. I guess some people have mixed feelings about it because it's pretty, sketchy, but his stuff's very popular. Like he sells like crazy. When he did some Transformer stuff recently, but he works really, really rough, and then just jumps into ink really fast, and makes a good mess. Descender, it sounds familiar. Was that the one about the kid with like the robot thing in his coming out of his head or something? Or is it like the kid's like an AI robot or something? I think I might have some of that on Comixology. Um, okay. So I've got like I don't remember who did that one. I've got a bunch of the large compendiums from like Rick Remender. So I've got Deadly Class and Low and Seven to Eternity, kind of in those big library formats. Low's is Greg Tocchini, and then Deadly Class is mostly, I think it's all Wes Craig. He's doing his own creator series right now. But I like these really large kind of library formats. I think they're really nice. But I kind of reset my kind of expectations with the pencils here to be more like, let's get the structure and the lighting and the perspective on here so I can move into the inking. Because I can noodle all day long on things, which is a bit of a problem. I don't remember how Descender went. It felt a little dry when I read it, but maybe I didn't get it, or I was reading it too slowly or too quickly or something. But if you haven't read Low or Deadly Class, I definitely recommend those. Um, Deadly Class is these 4 huge volumes, and it's basically about. It's kind of like imagine like Harry Potter, but it's a school for assassins, and it's like mostly made up of people from the major crime families or people selected from those crime families, and it's about a kid who kind of gets selected after his parents get murdered. And it's set up during the 80s, so it's kind of like they're growing up in the 1980s, and the kid has like a real hate for Ronald Reagan because he let some crazy person out of an asylum, and that's the person that killed his parents. And so his big dream is to assassinate Reagan. Of course, I recommended his characters like to talk about like life and philosophy and things like that to a certain degree. And so they talk a lot about like 80s music and why different bands mattered to them. So that's kind of an interesting way to kind of present their kind of the thinking of the characters, because they're all mostly teenagers. So it's about that. It's pretty intense. Like it's not Harry Potter friendly, audience friendly. It's pretty pretty brutal stuff. Kids getting murdered and murdering people. All the underground crime stuff you'd expect. But the gorgeous art and really well told story. And then the other series I have down there, these are both complete, which is nice because they're all the way done. Is Low, LOW, and it's basically the title's kind of the theme of it. So it's basically how bad can things get, how low can you go, and it's about humanity in the future is living under the water to kind of protect themselves from the sun. That's kind of gradually going supernova in the sky, so it's gradually expanding. And I guess at some point they sent out some probes to see if they could find another planet to move to, and none of them ever came back. But nobody knows. None of the public really know that. But the colonies that live underwater are starting to run out of their resources and their ability to protect themselves from the solar radiation that's getting worse and worse. And so things are starting to get really bad, but nobody really understands why or how, beyond the top level people. And then it's about a family that they've kind of got this machine that they use to protect their colony. And the very beginning, the dad gets killed, the family gets separated, and things like don't go well for them. And it's kind of how they kind of get back together and try to find a solution to their problem, even though there doesn't appear to be any solution forthcoming. And what does that mean about who they are and the choices that they make? So that's Low. And Seven to Eternity is about this group of seven heroes that go off to face a king who can offer them and give them anything they want for a price. And they see him as a tyrant that they must destroy. And the focus is a father who goes out to stop this from happening, and he's dying from some kind of terrible disease. So everyone's kind of concerned that he may try to make a deal. It's kind of about their adventure as they cross the fantasy world they live in. It's more realistic, though there is again a whole there's a whole I guess series of episodes in the middle of it that are all drawn by James Herron, who just finished up his own current book, but. So, but those are some of like the big library editions I have over there. In terms of my own collection of stuff. So, but they're really nice. Like they're big. They're not quite as big as this paper, but they're pretty big in terms of the presentation format. Big library editions. So. I think Descender, wasn't that all like watercolor too? Wasn't it colored all like with watercolor? That seemed to pop into my head all of a sudden. If I recall correctly. Yeah, that's what I remember. Those series is kind of interesting. They've got a couple of graphic novels out called Something is Killing the Children, and it's about basically children's imaginary nightmares of monsters. They come alive, they become real, and they kill people. But only the children can see them. But they still kill like people around them. So people are getting like ripped apart and eaten as these imaginary monsters emerge from these children's imaginations. There's different types, but anyway, there's a group. I think it's the Order of Saint George, if I recall, which makes sense, right? With the dragons and things like that. But they go around, defeating and killing these monsters. But there's one little wrinkle in there, is that they also kill all of the witnesses, including the child, to these monsters. One of their major tasks is to keep it all secret. And so in order to do that, they have to eliminate all of the witnesses. And some of them do it with great glee. And so the story follows one young lady sometimes they'll find kids and they're young enough, they'll take them into the order and train them. And if they survive the training process, they become one of these monster hunters. And anyway, so it's the story of one of those kids and she kind of starts to rebel against this system. Super sketchy artwork, but it's really good storytelling. I got sneeze. Whew. Excuse me. But yeah, it's really great stuff in there. My only little complaint I have about it, I noticed as I was reading through it, is so the artist, maybe they weren't confident in drawing architecture and mechanical things like cars and that, but it looks to me like when they're drawing like a bus or a city scene or a street corner or something like that, they're tracing a photo, and it kind of sticks out just because of the way the rest of the work looks. I think they got better at it over time. You can kind of see the improvement, but it stuck out to me a few times as I was reading. I was like, wait, this is. They try to keep it loose while they were sketching on tracing, but it still was definitely a tracing or something. Which, just kind of make it feel slightly less consistent with itself. But it's a great story, really interesting characters and scary monsters and all of that. Hello, Crimson. You're back. Well, welcome back. Yeah, so that's something that's killing the children. But it's interesting, premise there. But definitely recommend it if you haven't read it. It's still ongoing, but there's like a couple of nice kind of hardcover editions for it. Just got ourselves a nice little rainstorm a while ago. So yeah, going, I've got headphones on, so it's hard for me to tell. Yeah, but yeah. There's a lot of really great stuff out there that's worth checking out. If you haven't, looked at things. And I like like I said, I got those Kenneth Rocafort crowdfunded books he did. I think it was Indiegogo, but called Broken. And like the art's really gorgeous, the storytelling's pretty good, but the only problem is like I think he needs like an English speaker to proofread his dialogue, because it's really awkward to read because it's just like it feels like it's just not quite right. I don't know what your native language is, but mine's English, and so if I read something that doesn't sound quite right in English, it kind of messes with my. And it's very distracting. But otherwise, it's great. It's just it's pretty obvious that I think he's from Puerto Rico. You can really use an native English speaker to proofread his text. Like he kind of uses the wrong words and things like that. Yeah. His is really detailed, but it's very kind of sketchy at the same time. So I don't think he inks his. I think he just uses his pencils and then pumps up the contrast on them. Rather than do the branch up here. rather than doing the actual inking. Yeah, well, if you're trying to keep up with, say, Berserk, right? So you go read the free Berserk website, while you're waiting for the next volumes to come out, and they're translating. Someone else is doing the translation, and it's always like a little strange. But comics are a visual medium, so hopefully the language doesn't get in the way too much. But it can make a difference. So. Yeah, if you like sketchy stuff, you should check out like Daniel Warren Johnson and James Herron. Even someone who's fairly detailed, but is still very much a sketch approach, is like Sean Gordon Murphy. Used to be like this kind of generation of artists who are all kind of very popular at the moment that kind of have this kind of more sketch style to them. I think kind of being a little looser too, which is kind of my intent maybe with these pages here. I've got a top panel, I need to cut back on the detail, but I think it'll help me work a little quicker too. So I can definitely noodle on something for a long time without really adding to it. But I could also see him like he writes it in Spanish, and maybe he runs it through like Google Translate. It says it's correct, so why not, right? It did say it had like a editor or a proofreader or something like that on there, but his name looked Spanish to me, so I don't know if he's got the right proofreader for his project. Shadow for this thing will be offset a bit. Let's see. Shadow needs to go back a little bit. That. Come back this way. And this will be getting some shadow from that. Fuselage coming back. I appreciate that, Dawn. Over on the Instagram side. So there's the back here. I got a artist edition of Daniel Warren Johnson's Extremity book. Extremity or Extreme? Extremity. Recently. And I was shocked by how big it was. I mean, it was advertised to be as big as it was, but I was still surprised by it. Let's see what that shadow is. It's basically a full version of the it's scanned. It's just the scanned pages of the actual comic book, and it's full size. So it's 11 by 17 sheets. For some reason, my brain didn't register that when I ordered it. When I got in on the Kickstarter, last year, and so when it arrived, I was quite shocked by how big it was. It was just like this massive, heavy package, which explained the shipping price for that thing, but. And he's become kind of a rock star since he popped on 10, 15 years ago. As a comics guy, so anything he does sells really well, especially artistically. But he's pretty rough. So you can watch him he has YouTube. He does weekly live streams, and he shows he'll draw live or whatever on the stream for about an hour every Friday, and Friday with D-Dubs, and he's really, really rough, and then just starts slapping ink on it really fast. So he's pretty fast in how he works. We did the Transformers series for a bit, the newer one that's going on right now. We've been writing it for the last year, but the illustrations for the first 6 issues or something like that. And anyway, I did this artist edition of his Extremity series last year. Did really well. I think I just didn't realize how big it was. It's almost too big to look at because it's huge. It's the whole series, every single page, and covers scanned in on this big, heavy format. Definitely worth it. I was just surprised by how massive it was. The story itself is about a brother and sister. One is a warrior, the sister is a warrior, the brother is an artist, and they lose their father in this kind of ongoing civil war they have with a related civilization. And a lot of his stuff deals with that kind of personal trauma and loss, and kind of standing up to their own feelings and kind of improving themselves in the situations that they're in. Usually some kind of crazy premise, like his Murder Falcon book, which is about a band, like a rock band that meets a heavy metal falcon man who fights monsters, but he gets powered up by rock music. I have no video requests. Sorry about that. Called Murder Falcon. There's a library version for that too. It's not like gigantic or anything, but it's still pretty nice. So this group back a little bit more. So it's not in the way of the drawing. I've actually got this perspective technique. It's not one I've ever tried before. But basically, you put even divisions on each side, and then you can draw across to them. So if you want to go narrower this way, one set of divisions is narrow on this side compared to the other side. You just kind of connect the dots going across. And they do a similar thing going the other way. You can draw some verticals through it, and you can draw lines going the other way. And it kind of makes a usable perspective grid without having to do the whole thing. Which is kind of interesting because I'm used to I can do the whole, I could measure these wings to make sure they're absolutely perfect size and everything for a person. In fact, I need to make this a little lower. I'll probably put the tire here in the back. But I was looking for just something like a little bit quicker, but it was still really manageable. But he was showing off that technique. He also uses a even space divider, which I don't have, but I've ordered one. It just won't be here for a while. Basically, it's like a thing you can squeeze, and it'll kind of has a bunch of teeth on it. This one has 11, and basically allows you to put 11 marks down very quickly, and then you can adjust the size, put it on the other side, mark it off really quickly, and then connect everything up together. And been looking at different ones, but they just take a while to get here. So they're not that common of a tool. I think they're used a lot in leather works for making buttonholes. So you can you can set it to be evenly spaced and mark it off really quick. So looking forward to trying that out when it gets here eventually. But the technique I used here worked fine too. Anyway, this guy, he's perched his ship on top of one of these bramble structures, and he has to get out and across, and so he's basically looking over the edge of a cliff right here. There's some clouds out there. but I think most of this shadow just to create a little silhouette. On these wings. So let's see if I can put something here. Maybe I'll take a break a little bit later and pull out that low book or something as well, since I've looked at those. It's all this wonderful Greg Tocchini art. He's a Brazilian artist. He works mostly traditionally. He actually did a one with Rick Remender called Last Days of American Crime, which I think was also a movie or something on Netflix at some point. It's about like a people looking to do a robbery just before a kind of a massive mind-reading surveillance program goes online that also pacifies people. And so they're basically trying to get their bag before the system goes online. So they don't get caught. And it's kind of an interesting premise. Let me know if you're interested in that. I can pull it out. There's our hero here. I thought it was like his groups, they're called tree hoppers. Kind of, it's a creature called a tree hopper, right? The bug. They've got kind of interesting hats. But the idea with them is the character, he's got these, I think they call them blade prosthetics. So you see people like missing part of their legs or whatever. They have these kind of curved blades in place of their lower leg and feet, so they can run and jump and all those things fairly comfortably. My thought was, well, what if someone was wearing that all the time? I don't know if that's practical or not, but I figured that'd be a good way of like getting around this territory where there's a lot of ups and downs, so you have to jump around a lot. So he's got a set of those attached to his boots, and he used them to ground. I think it also got used in the Portal game. The girl in there, she wears leg prosthetics, which I remember later on. But maybe they get used other places. I don't know. But that's what I was thinking. Remembering right. I've seen athletes and that Portal game once upon a time. Portal 3 confirmed, right? Or something. But let's see a more definition. Glider here. Kind of been building this glider in 3D, but I don't really need to because I don't really see it here on this page. But I thought it would be an interesting project to kind of take some of the things that we're learning about Blender and build it. The ships I'm calling sliver ships. These gliders are super long and narrow. One of the things that's fun too about maybe I've been thinking about for this project is adding in dirigibles. So, balloon transports. Because one of the things with this plan is they're kind of stuck on it. So they can use certain. They eventually find out. This part of what this guy finds out is that you can use the plant life or certain plant life for electricity in that for power, but they don't have enough to leave. So there's not like fossil fuels or sufficient reactor mass or whatever that's safe, so they can leave the planet. They're kind of stuck. Which is unfortunate for them because up above is floating a one of the original colony ships, and they can't quite communicate with it for some reason, and they can't leave to go up and investigate. So they're kind of desperate for better ways of doing things. If that makes any sense. I'd love to get this penciled in pretty quick so I can jump into the game and get into the story a bit more. So, the initial shots here, it could be somewhere on Earth, but maybe there's just something that isn't quite the same. So, the kind of way of introducing it, I want it to feel more or less similar, and then, just kind of open up the view. It's definitely not where we're from. So that's part of the intent as well. We're no longer in Kansas, as it were. It's distracting. Go find a pizza. Ah, poor little dog. Check there. All right. Let's see. Well, I've got one up here. I mean, it doesn't get much closer than this, right? I will later on, but that's pretty close, right? That was really tanky. I didn't even notice. The internet connection isn't great. It's not good. That's back to being good again. Seems okay. This is the 2H. Yeah, so we'll definitely get a lot of characters up close later on. It'll be disclosed as we go forward. That's part of what let me do this. I hadn't done as much character stuff historically, and so I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years improving that skill, and I figured this kind of project would be a good place to do that, to apply what I've learned. So that's part of the genesis of this project is wanting to do more of that. Background as far as teaching, like taught a lot of figure drawing over the years. That's probably my most common subject. Not currently teaching it at this university I'm at, but character stuff is very different than that too, to a certain degree. I mean, the knowledge you get from figure drawing and life drawing and painting is really applicable. But there's more to the character side than I'd really anticipated to a certain degree. Yeah, which is good. Yeah, it means I got to learn some new stuff. Again, my background's mostly doing environments and creatures and things like that. But due to the nature of the kinds of classes I was teaching now, I felt like I really needed to improve in that area. Do I know who Gojo is? Sounds familiar. I assume it's some kind of manga or anime character. Sounds familiar. Is that like a Dragon Ball Z thing or something? Maybe. Never watched that show, so. Okay. Watch some anime, but not a lot. Um, it's like I'm familiar with the. What's that? Let's see. Messenger. Yep. Not at the moment. Um, but I haven't watched it. That's it's like I really like the old school. What's it called? Robotech. That came out in the '80s. Of course, what's it called? Oh, I just forgot the name of it. The something Cowboy Bebop. There we go. That was really good. I do digital stuff, of course. Yeah, I'm fairly proficient in all the computer stuff. I like the iPad. I can use Procreate pretty well. I prefer one called Infinite Painter over Procreate. It's got a lot of handy tools in it that Procreate doesn't have, and brushes that Procreate isn't built for. Um, Done 3D modeling and 3D sculpting. Um, can oil paint. I like wash. I like the landscape painting. Uh, so I've got a broad kind of range, maybe too broad of a range. I've never done comics, so what is my most favorite thing in the world? I don't know. Maybe my dog. He's pretty cool. He's sleeping over there on the side. I like him. Keeps me on schedule. Reminds me that I'm a moron all the time because he snorts at me when I'm telling him things that are obvious. Like, going for WAOK. So he's definitely on that favorites list. I have seen your vid on like what are you saying? I'm not sure what that means. But connection looks okay. Yeah, I've done a lot of digital stuff. So when I was in school, it was kind of that transition period. So I only had like one professor who had like really good digital experience, and we used mostly used Corel Painter back then. So it was like early mid 2000s. Photoshop was okay, like people used it for digital painting. It had some drawbacks, and Corel Painter had these pluses. Corel Painter's since fallen off a lot. They're still around, and I still like it, but it's definitely not as popular as it was, and it's kind of their own fault. But I think part of it is the art market's really small. Just like Photoshop never really focused that much on illustration, despite becoming very popular for illustrators to use. Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I do a lot of digital stuff, but this is kind of what I'm focused on at the moment. Maybe I'll come on in the afternoon when I'm working on or later morning when I'm working on the Blender stuff, and watch me kind of yell at the computer because I'm not as good at that stuff. When it crashes or does something weird or something I did not properly anticipate. That can be entertaining, I think. Probably, right? Like I'm pretty comfortable with pencil. Um, yeah, I use Macs, I use PCs. I stream through my Mac just because it's an older Mac, and so it's just kind of set up on a laptop. It's an old MacBook I bought a long time ago after leaving SCAD. The computer's like 8 years old now, which is quite shocking. Um, but I use that to stream from the regular PCs off to the side. Yeah. Yeah, I use the iPad a lot lately these days. I do stuff on the computer too, but I tend to use the iPad a lot for digital stuff just because it's so convenient. The only reason to not use it is if you're doing something extremely large or very specific. Uh, yeah, it was funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who never used Macs really, and he's asking me so what's really good for tablets out there? And I'm like, just the iPad for art, that is. He's mostly a 3D guy, likes to build games. And I was just like, yeah, still just the iPad's the best one to get in terms of drawing tablets, standalone ones. Got the best apps and the best hardware. It is expensive, but it's still the best one. I don't know. There might be some okay budget ones now, but as far as I've seen, though, that's the only one that people fairly consistently. But I've got Clip Studio Paint. I've used that one a bit. Not as proficient with it just because I haven't put in the time yet. But I know all the kids are into it these days, into the Clip Studio. Seems really good. Krita, I've seen a lot of people using Krita, which is free. I think I've experimented with it a little bit. I think Dave Raposa, who does a lot of live streaming, he mostly uses Krita. And that one again is free, which is nice. It's always a good. As soon as a software, like a lot of times, it's not worth fighting free software. But that one's pretty good, from what I understand. Yeah, I probably have like a short or something or a reel, whatever they call them on YouTube. That's and then like there's two of the perspective courses I have on my teaching site over at my art professor, and all that's all done on Photoshop. I have a traditional media series that's more for like my freshman students, but like the deep dives into Photoshop, or deep dives into perspective in 1 and 2 point. I used Photoshop for those. It's handy popping around using the navigator in there to kind of move the stuff around with it. Yeah, so I think people sometimes get confused because I do a lot of different things, which I understand. People are easily confused on the internet these days. For me, a lot of what drives a lot of this stuff is my curiosity, but also depending on my role when I'm teaching, I feel kind of obligated to obey what I consider the first rule of teaching, which is to know thy shit. It's always the first rule. I've actually had disagreements with teachers about that. We're like, well, you don't need to know, the whatever class you're teaching. You can redirect them to tutorials, and you can provide them with feedback, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I think you got to know what you're talking about. The only exception to that would be like a student doing an independent study, and they want to go deep into something you don't know about, or aren't as proficient in. So I could see that. And the other one is like a student portfolio class where the students are working on their own kind of self-defined projects. And it's not like a technical development class. It's not like a portrait painting class or concept drawing class or something like that, where the medium is wide open, so students could be working with just about anything. And I kind of ran into that to a certain degree with when I was a student doing a lot of digital stuff. Because my senior project advisor, was an acrylic guy, and he was okay with digital stuff. Like he'd sat down and learned a lot, but it wasn't his area of expertise. But he was proficient at illustration and composition and storytelling and aesthetics and those things, and so he could look at my pictures I was working on the computer and say, oh well, your textures aren't very good, or your lighting isn't very good, or your drawing is messed up, and you need to get more reference, or whatever. Hard to believe that professor just turned to 80 this year. I saw him. He's looking really good. His father lived to his 90s, well to his 90s, so hopefully he'll stick around a lot longer. Um, and actually, I got him a second teaching job after he retired, which is kind of funny. He's been teaching there pretty much ever since, with occasional breaks. Um, he retired from his original university, and then he wasn't planning on ever teaching again. I was talking, they were looking for some adjuncts at the school I was at, and I was like, well, this guy just retired. Sure, he wouldn't mind. He lives just up the street, coming in a couple times a week to, teach an illustration or a painting class or something like that. It's like, they're like, oh, you think so? Okay, he'd be happy to do that. So he's been with them a long time now, which is just really funny to me. Because he lives up the street from that school. It's not the one he retired from. It's a different one. But poor Richard ruined his life. I do that to people. Open up doors and opportunities for people, and disrupts the things that they were doing before. Hopefully, in a better direction. I mean, I'm sure he would have been happy just painting in the studio or illustrating or whatever, but. But I think this is better for him anyway. Let's see. How do we feel about this panel? Touching up details in here. What's nice is I can go into, when I scan this in, put it into Photoshop, I'll be able to get rid of all of the blue lines in it, and keep the gray, convert that to black and white, and then convert it back to blue line, and print it on the paper I'm going to ink on. Then the whole little process there, which is nice. Thought about printing it out, this with red instead of blue, just because I like the red look better. I think, to a certain degree. It doesn't matter now. Like traditionally, you use like the non-photo repo blue, which is a particular color shade of blue that didn't reproduce when you photocopied something. machines, like invisible photocopy machines or something. That doesn't matter now. You separate out the color, match it, and remove it pretty easily. But blue is kind of the traditional color to do it in. Let's see, 30. I'll take a break and grab one of those books to show. What I could go for is another lens up here. The one I want though is it's like $800, but it would allow me to kind of zoom out a lot further while also still being able to zoom in as much as I can. I can zoom in pretty tight with this thing. But there's one that goes from I think 35 or 50 to the same amount this one goes to, so I think it's like 170. I think it also auto zooms, which this telephoto lens doesn't. I could buy it. I feel, unless I'm making more money on live streaming or YouTube or whatever, it feels hard to justify that expense. They've got this Sony A6000 or A600, whatever the number is on it, 600. But they did release a newer one, I think last year finally. That one will actually shoot and actually broadcast in 4K with the use of a camera thing. It's called. I have one for this one. It's had it for a long time. But which would be nice, I think, to have that option, but also be able to get that lens. I think the camera body wasn't that expensive. I think it's like $800 or $900. This one still works though. I've been using it a long time. check over the rest of this page, make sure it's done-ish. We're cranking along okay with this, considering how much time I put into it. That's what I did yesterday. Before. I wanted to simplify some of the detail on the face, so it's too wrinkly. A lot of these unnecessary wrinkles. It's like an overly contrasty version of me. I don't want to read quite that. It's older than me. It's important to be able to, pull back. Even on things you thought were important. I'll probably color this thing digitally too. Try to keep it as flat as possible. Alright, I'll be right back. Grab another page. We'll continue for about another, I don't know, hour and a half-ish or so. I'll do this here. Actually, I might look at this a little bit too in a minute, but I'll be right back. Alright, let's see. Missing anything over here? Look like it. Alright. Let's set this aside. And this page actually is a double page spread. And should line up out here. So I need to trim them both off. I think I can just trim one side. For whatever reason, I forgot when I was doing these to put the lines, the trim lines things on top of the layer, so they didn't show up properly. I think all I have to do is cut one of them on one side. Grab you. And grab my ruler. This one should just be along here. Here or somewhere else. Put one in here. Doesn't look like it. It's not in here. It might be downstairs, I think, or somewhere in here. There. I gotta find that knife. This is why you put things away, right? But not too away. There. Need a razor. hopefully not make a mess in the process, right? When you do a 2-page spread, you have to trim it in the right spot. This one should be right there. So I can see that stuff right on the other side of that line. Let's see, get that right on there. I was drawing and I am out of something. The trick to cutting a straight line is to actually do it in a couple shots, rather than trying to cut through all in one. And we got a nice even cut. Throw that away. This ruler, by the way, I've had this ruler since I was a freshman. I had to buy it for my supplies. And had it ever since. So next step here, getting some tape on the back. Lead or fed. Tape there. And tape here. I need to cut off this side too, which is what actually I anticipated I was supposed to do, but I wanted just to be sure before I cut off too much. So that's good. You're supposed to kind of cut off the middle of each side. It's the way it's supposed to work. We got ourselves a spam bot. I love those. Now you'd think the systems that these streaming companies use would be able to kind of spot those pretty easily. But they all use the same info. Adding a craft knife to my upstairs kit to my list. I've got all this working space, but I always feel like I'm still tripping over myself here. That lines up. All right. There we go. Yeah, so you wanted enough space in between to do with the fold, so left it that way. We're getting closer to our character here, you see, than we were before. We'll start on that side. Back a little bit. Should put some more tape down in the middle. That should have to keep flopping around. One more piece. So we got a little gap down there. Try to keep from putting it where I'll be drawing on top of it, so I don't kind of stencil it in by accident. Yeah. Right spot. Voila. So these things are more convenient for me. Alright. Alright, that's fine. Alright, I want to get rid of that guy too real quick. Bot. Yeah. There you go. Cleaned up. Oh, you're out of lead. I see. LEAD. So not LED. So I should get my concept reference than I did for this character out since we're a little closer up here. So I can stick with the details, make it correct. All right. Yeah, always make sure you have enough supplies, right? So here's the ship up there. I don't know how much the perspective lines I'll need this because it's mostly organic except for this. And that's just going to be a silhouette up here. Good evening, everybody. Coming in. Let's see. anybody have any questions out there? I mean, I'm more than happy just to draw, but there's a guy leaping off the edge here. As it were. Jumping down past some clouds. Alright, let's get to our character here. Let's see. In case I'm confusing myself, let's get my pages on here. Let's see. Pencil strokes. Wrong angle. Let's wrap it this way. Still hearing thunder out there outside of my headphones. Good evening. People popping in. Getting some good thunder out there, sounds like. Dog's actually handling it okay, so he doesn't really like having a bunch of thunder booming around outside, his boom booms. But he doesn't get bothered by fireworks, but thunder is definitely not okay. So that's good to see he's not bothered. I'd rather he not care. I'd rather be scared by the sounds outside. What do I do after 9:20, huh? I'm gonna start thinking about closing it off for the night. Good evening. Well, welcome back. Just in time to almost be done for the evening. Oh, well, hopefully it's functional, right? As well as styling. As long as the fashion kids thinks it's cool, right? That's the important part. I think this is to be Yeah, I finished it this evening, so yeah, if you back it up a little bit, you'll see the completion there. Finished up that bottom panel. See if I can avoid ruining these boots. I'll try to get the structure of these boots in, and then we'll call it a night. And that'll give us a good spot to pick up tomorrow, right? Should be down here. Parallel with that boot. Go back further like that. Be careful with how I get invested in the detail, right? Just silence and my thoughts, huh? Is that all you found? My deep, silent thoughts? They are very profound. Sometimes. Let's see. Back's going to be I like to use my leave it for tomorrow productivity trick. This is where if I know what I'm going to do next, I can basically leave that, stop there, pick up with that tomorrow. That circular thing move down here because if I open that circle up there, it goes up above the shoulder a bit. So let's see. So this one will be down here. That. Go back. Something like that. Hey, good evening over there. We're just about to close up for tonight, but well, yeah. Minutes. You came late to class. That is absence for you. Showing up like that. For shame. I am. We just finished penciling page 1. This is page, well, technically it's page, I guess, 3 if you count title page. So page 3, page 4, me, issue 1. Well, I guess I told that story, I think, in here before. But basically, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I didn't know people could make a living doing art because I came across comics. I was like, oh, that's a whole thing, right? People making comics. And then I read somewhere about how much they made per page, and I was like, oh, well, that doesn't sound very good. But I didn't know about something called royalties. And that really what they were getting paid was an advance on royalties. So comic artists could actually do really well with money as long as what they were doing was selling consistently and good numbers. But I didn't know anything about that. I just knew what their page rate was back then, and if I'd known what it was, I might have focused a little bit differently. But didn't. But yeah, I've been working on a concept project for myself, and kind of a portfolio update thing, skills update portfolio. And I've been kind of having stories coming into my head as I've been developing it, especially when I got to the character part, because you need to have characters need some kind of rationale for what they're like. And so as I've been doing that, I'm thinking, it would be a really good idea is to maybe try this out as a comic kind of put this together and see what I could do with some of these. And kind of go from there. Whether I do it like as a crowdfunder or just to do it, or maybe put in front of Image or somebody like that. Who knows, right? Not this kind of, not comics. Um, Mostly I've worked as a, professionally as a concept artist. I've done some illustration where it was like published for, it was like a mural for a regional gas station out west, in the western U.S., Maverick. Did a big illustrated mural to the interior of their gas stations. And that was kind of my big project, but that's different than regular publishing, like comics or that sort of thing. So not really this kind of work. But I figured if put together some kind of pitch project, that would be see what happens with that. Got a title for it. This one is the overall project is Bramble. This one might be called Tree Hopper. It's kind of based again around this concept project. So it's called Bramble because of where these humans have colonized this planet, and the planet itself looks like a giant tangle of plants, like intertwined vines at a distance. When you get closer, there's huge, massive structures. You see them jumping off of one right here. And anyway, something happened when they arrived where some of the colony ships got separated in the landings and crashed and disappeared. And this particular story is set 80 years later. So the humans have settled on this planet, and while it's definitely very habitable, they've discovered evidence of a previous civilization of aliens that used to live there, but there's no evidence of their biology. Like there's no bodies, there's no bones or biological mass or anything. There's just kind of these ancient artifacts scattered around the planet. And but this story is about a guy. They think they found one of the ships, the old colony ships. Again, it's set 80 years after, so they're not really looking to see if there's survivors, but maybe there's supplies or equipment or something that the new colony can use. And so he's been sent out to investigate. It's called Tree Hopper because it's got these prosthetics. Blade prosthetics allow him to jump because of the way the terrain works there. There's a lot of verticality. I don't know that we'll see him use them that much here. Just this part of it. But yeah, so he's landed his sliver ship, kind of a glider. So they're kind of stuck on the planet. They can't really leave. They don't have the power to do that. But So he's on his way to investigate this ship. Good for supplies and information, whatever else could be worthwhile to bring back to the colony. This is kind of my test project. So basically, I haven't really done this before, so I figure what I do is I've got a general direction and then kind of plan it out, say a scene at a time, and go from there. And it'll let me kind of play with the inking and the penciling process a bit more, because again, it's not something I have that much experience with. This type of very specific thing. So, because I've got another story I've actually written up, and it's set much, much later. The humans kind of have adapted to living here. It's hundreds of years later, and where these artifacts are for the ancient aliens that aren't there anymore. Some of the regions where they're located at are kind of forbidden wilderness zones where you're not allowed to go. And so she, as character, is a guide, and she takes this bureaucrat and his daughter out on an excursion to visit some of these sites. And in the process of that, they get separated. The kid runs off by herself. All kinds of dangerous things in the surrounding forests. They're all there kind of for their own reasons. They're not being entirely honest about. And so that's a story I've kind of written up. It's a bit more complicated with more complicated characters. But there's like different time periods I've thought about would be interesting to tell stories from. So like maybe this one, if I expand on it further, it could include the tales from the landing. Could be kind of disclosed as part of this. So, anyway, I think this is where I'm going to pause it for tonight. I'll be back for my morning study warm-up in the morning. And pick up with this probably in the evening, maybe earlier in the day too, depending on what's going on. But all right. Anyway, thanks everybody that came in. Mega shock, huh? Sounds pretty intense. Anyway, I'm going to call it there. I need to get bring the day to an end and get back to this tomorrow.